Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and hear from industry experts. Simplifying an API is like sharpening a knife. Both make the task at hand quicker and more efficient, saving time and reducing effort. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode is recorded on February 26th, 2024. Kris. APIs and sharpening knives.
Saving time.
How does that all fit? Saving time, or, as we learned, saving life.
Saving life.
And one thing you talk about, one thing that's important, just like a carpenter or contractor has many tools, what's important? Using the right tool to solve a problem. With us today, we had another full conversation, full of so much information. We covered APIs, licensing, and a few other pronunciation lessons. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Jeremy Vyska. Kris, someone's at the door again. This door has a lot of activity these days. I wonder who it could be. I'm always anxious and curious to see who can be behind the door.
Who's it? Hey! Jeremy.
Jeremy, good afternoon. Good morning. I love that background.
Are those stickers?
No, they're actually little bead art designs my
Oh,
kiddo made
wow.
for me.
That is so cool.
Great. So it's a pegboard. Where did you get that big BC logo?
Ah, that guy. This was from Dynamics Minds.
Oh,
That's massive.
We
That is
kidnapped
great.
it at the end of the conference.
So you have a sword. Is that a wooden pegboard? And then
It is,
the
yep.
beads stick to it?
There's a little adhesive on the back.
It's
That's
kind of
pretty
like
cool.
a video game. That is great. You have gems. You have a sword, arrows.
All
It's
various bits
exactly
and
a mouse.
pieces.
A mouse, not a mouse, a mouse pointer. It's like a video game. It's perfect.
There's lots of bits and pieces that are treasured memories from games that my son and I have played together. So
Nice. That's awesome.
It reminds me of Zelda, to be honest.
you are correct. Those are what those
Yes.
little crystals around the edge are from, and the sword as well.
Yeah.
It's one of the Zelda
Oh,
games.
that's excellent. Oh, I need to get a good background like that. I'm anxious to see. We'll have to speak with you again to see what other background you can pick up. But
It's always like a treasure hunt, you know? Treasure hunt. What's behind you?
There are lots and lots of little bits and pieces of different things. Like this is the original Cal programming guide from, I think, 2000 that you used to get when you went to Atlanta, Georgia.
Wow.
All sorts of different little odds and ends from the different conferences. Yep.
That is great.
Should do all
I
of
see the
that.
Dynamics Minds. You have the buttons. You have your MVP logo. You have. I need a background like that. I'm going to have to.
You
copy
set
that.
your background.
I wish I had the guides from when I first started working. When you went down to Georgia, and you were able to work with it. Even the little workbooks that they had when you were doing the classes, which was great.
Sure.
But
I
Jeremy,
gave the Navi Lube project to a junior dev recently and been like, give this a try. The UI has changed, but the product basically is still functional in the ways you would do this. Good luck.
yes. What installation media do you have? I was looking at what I had because I had to free up some space on my cloud storage, and I only had back to version 4. had version 4, version 5, version 2009.
I'm pretty sure I have some of the 2 versions, and I definitely have some of the 3s. I can't say I have as extensive of a collection, but yep.
You should have one of those episodes where you bring all the who has the oldest treasure.
Well, Eric will win.
Come on. Jeremy, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Yeah, it was March 2nd, 2023, I believe, where we had the opportunity to speak with you about your Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central API reference book.
Yep.
And the timing is perfect because recently I saw that you had also released the no-code API factory data brader.
True.
And
absolutely true.
that also sparked some interest, and I wanted to speak with you a little bit more to learn more about the API factory, how it works, what it does, how it can be used, and everything else, because now you are Mr. API to me. And
well, I still will always pass that particular crown to AJ, but I'm pretty comfortable being a close second on that one.
Okay. We'll have to speak with AJ to get him on to see if he would speak with us to be take his title of Mr. API. So if you would, before we get into that, I'm certain that many know you because not only because of all that you do for the Business Central community, but the amazing background that you have. But would you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I'm in that category of folks that has become standard to call us, the nav dinosaurs. We're trying not to go extinct, but trained up a long time ago at this point, 24 years ago as a developer originally. And as you do when you were back in the nav days, you end up kind of just spreading into all the other roles of, suddenly you're helping in implementation, then you're doing support, now you're writing docs, and it's a little bit of everything. And I think that is one of the ways that David Singleton refers to us dinosaurs, that you're kind of that one-man team skill set. Which is fun. But these days in the more BC era, some of the different bits and pieces people may know me for would be the API reference book that came out that we talked about last time. I had the earlier book, Your First 20 Hours with Business Central. There are some freebies that I've done for the community for some odds and ends, like streams about how to go onto AppSource, as well as wallpaper packs, which I think a number of people have seen the artwork around and occasionally been like, where'd you get that? And that's free at sparebrain.com. So, and there's also a licensing app that we've had on the market now for a year and a half or so that lets people do monetization of AppSource apps before Microsoft made that more widely available. So a few different odds and ends for sure.
Yes, you have a lot out there. And that dinosaur, like the dinosaurs, that whole pack of dinosaurs seems to be coming back to the surface because, as you had said, nobody wants to be extinct or become extinct. But I think we have to one day have a conversation with a lot of the dinosaurs. We have to find the oldest dinosaurs, get everybody together, and talk about how not to become extinct. See if dinosaurs can prevent extinction.
One of the funnier moments around that, age in the industry and that sort of thing that came up recently was back in November at Directions EMEA, we had the BC Beer and R Live, and traditionally there's a quiz time associated with the BC Beer and R. So we had this great time where people got grouped up into teams, and then we were trying to answer questions. But one of the first things that they wanted us to do was, amongst your team, tell us the total number of years that you'd been doing nav or BC. And we went around the group, and the one of the Microsoft folks, I won't name him in case he doesn't want to be named, one of the Microsoft folks in the group who is vital to all the work we do today was the newest among all of us in our team with only 12 years. But I think our total ended up being well north of 100 between the 5 of us.
Wow. That we have to get everybody together. I have to get everybody's names. I know a lot that I speak with regularly, but we'll have to see if we can get a panel of dinosaurs together just to bring the relics back before they all become extinct. But you've been working with Business Central for a while with becoming in that dinosaur category. I'm sure you've gone through many implementations. And one question I have, which we tried to get with everybody that comes on, is if you could tell us one of your BC Nav horror stories from your history. You can just pick one.
Okay.
I'm sure you may have different levels of horror, but what stands out to you?
That would be the time I deleted all of a customer's ledgers in a production system on purpose.
Was it really on purpose?
It was. It was one of the...
Just the wrong database.
No. It was absolutely on purpose.
To do it.
And what the situation on this one was, I was actually brought into a customer, and they were considering moving off of NAV. They had a bad experience with the partner that they had been working with. The partner in question, it turned into a legal case, so I'm absolutely not naming names. They're not in the industry anymore, so it's not a big deal. But they had attempted to implement their own ledger application functionality for really detailed, like individual lines on invoices needed to go to separate payable, who the customer was. And so they had implemented their own strategy for this, but did it wrong. And as a result, every month that partner was just going into this customer's GL accounts and making adjustments to correct their errors rather than fixing the defects. And as a result of this, their customer ledger entries, all their general ledger entries related to every sales transaction was effectively wrong. And thankfully, they had archived what their logic was doing to a custom table, so kind of like their own little ledger entry system. So I ended up building for this poor customer a toolkit that destroyed all of the ledgers in their production system and recreated them correctly from this data. But ledger entry numbers are all interconnected. So if you're going to do something that big to the customer ledger entry, you have to do the general ledger entry. And if you have to do the general ledger entry, you have to do all the vendor, bank, everything. So that particular horror story would be the time that I wrote a code unit and ran it in production that started with general ledger.delete all, customer ledger.delete all, vendor ledger.delete all, bank account ledger.delete all. Like that. Unfortunately, everything else in their system had been implemented correctly. And so all the rest of the data was right. So they understandably didn't want to re-implement.
Yes.
But they ended up staying on the product for years.
That's great. And that must have been, I can imagine pressing that button. I know, because even if I do something, I always have to check 10,000 times which environment I'm in. And okay, what am I doing? Am I clicking this? Because, through the course of development, sometimes for testing or for something, you may need to do some, silly things. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with that? So, okay, great. Thank you for that horror story. I'm glad that everything seemed to work out well. And now you have some experience with that. I can't even imagine how that must have felt to click it. I don't know if I would actually feel good about it, if I would be nervous about it, or I know I'd be nervous about it, but afterwards how I would feel about it. Probably take me a little bit of time to recover.
It was definitely a perilous adventure. Even just checking the results afterwards was a terrifying few days of making sure all the accounts tied out.
I bet.
I'm glad you made it successful. So that leads us to the data braider. I know
Sure.
Business Central has APIs available that come with built with the base application. You can also create extensions to create your own APIs through the development environment.
Mhm.
But now I saw that there is your tool is available, the Data Breda, which allows
Yep.
you to create custom API endpoints in Business Central, in essence, without the need to develop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a few odds and ends out of that one. The the original creation of that came before the book. I was looking at, I had a bunch of different customers that were constantly needing to ask me to make small adjustments to expose data as APIs. As developers, especially those of you who are devs who are watching this, creating an API endpoint, a query one, page one, whatever have you, pretty easy overall. It's not terribly complicated. It can take a little bit of time, but there are some great extensions for Visual Studio Code that help you do that more efficiently, point and click through it. And then, we wrote the book, and there were so many questions that I got afterwards about the ERP system that you have has so many features. How can it only have 70 API endpoints? That I get very reasonable questions of there's purchase order endpoints, but there's no purchase credit memo endpoints. Is this really a fully baked API? And I reminded people that the API, as it was crafted, was to serve a particular function and role for the things that Microsoft needed for Business Central to communicate with within their own ecosystem. It is not specifically designed to be the API that does everything, because there are so many endpoints that don't exist for, even just the basic level for things like warehousing and manufacturing. There aren't any. And the idea behind that is it is easy to create your own APIs from a developer perspective. Okay, yeah, that's not too bad. But and Eric Hugard has his Simple Object Designer, which is a great app source app as well, that also has some no-code functionality for making API endpoints. So I just want to make sure I nod to that is also out there on the market space. It does a bunch of other things. But the question I kept getting is from not BC people, but customers and web integrators who are trying to connect to Business Central going, I don't understand Business Central enough to even begin to go down the process of making my own API from code. I don't know anything about AppSource. I'm not going to create AppSource apps. I'm not, for the like Magento connectors and WooCommerce connectors and all these different partners who want to support their BC customers. They went, how am I supposed to help my customers? And they usually would get answers back from their BC partner of, it'll take us 3 days to build those endpoints you want, or it'll take us 2 weeks to scope out all of these different connections you need. And the partners that contacted me because I wrote the book about API reference, they were like, well, shouldn't there be a way that I, as a technology savvy sort of person, can make something that would be able to help them? And so I went ahead and picked back up working with Breda to add all of the functionality for some of the different use case scenarios that aren't necessarily partners who need to help people, but they're power users who want to expose data via Power BI or Power Automate. They want to make that easy to get at tables that aren't accessible via the standard API endpoints. For the partners who are Power Automate partners or are like web integrator partners, they had reasonable questions of, what can I do to make it easy so that if I solve it for one customer, I can go to the next customer in 5-10 minutes, have them up and running. So this was to answer a lot of those particular challenges and needs. So this is based on some very specific requirements. But I think it's generally very useful. There's a bunch of things that are built into it that I've been asked the question over and over, what happens if Microsoft does what Data Breda does? And, I'm a BC guy. I would be extremely happy if they wanted to do the same things that Data Breda does. They could do it better because they control the platform. So there are some things that they could do easier. But there are also some things that are in here that are great for partners that have driven a couple of people to come talk to me to say, okay, working with the APIs is really straightforward until there's a problem. And how do I diagnose the problems? So I also tried to add some functionality around how can we do better analysis of what isn't working. So we'll see. We've had a definite interest from some partners from that perspective as well, because if you've ever done integration work and you say, here's all of the ways that you talk to my custom API, you hand that over to, your integration partner, and they go, well, I'm sending the data in, but I'm getting this error message. You really want to be able to look at what they actually sent in instead of what they said they sent in.
Yep.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And plucking that out of BC via telemetry can be very difficult for good GDPR reasons. But sometimes you really, especially in a test environment, need to be able to go, I need to know everything about this transaction.
Okay, great. That's one of the great things about Business Central, and you had mentioned it, is the flexibility and the ability for developers, to create tools, and then the customers, as you had mentioned, which is, a big target for your application that you had created within AppSource, to choose the right tool for them. I always say there isn't only always going to be one person or one thing that does it all, but having the ability to choose the right tool for the job you're trying to solve, or the problem you're trying to solve, is important. And you talked about Data Brader and how it can enhance the APIs within Business Central. And it's targets for customers who may not want to develop their own or pay their partner to develop their own, but still be able to communicate with an external integration for systems. It seems everybody I talk to now, there's integrations to everything. And I think it's just the way of the world. It's not a Business Central, craze. It's an everything craze, because everybody wants to talk to everybody with all of these systems. So with Data Brader, I have to change my accent. Okay, I'm going to try for this one because this will be a fun one. With Data, okay. Jeremy knows about the accent because he was originally a native of the Northeast. So I think, he sounds like he's lost it, but you remember it.
Oh, I've intentionally shed that long ago. But yes, as a fun sort of just chuckle aside for people who don't quite know, I managed to name my product something incredibly hard for a very specific part of the US to actually enunciate. Where I grew up, data is often said with an R at the end, dater. And the R at the end of Brader often becomes ah. So Dater Brader just goes off into La La Land.
All they have to do is just hit rewind, and they'll just keep hearing it. But that's exactly, as soon as I said it, I really wanted to curse you. I'm like, he really picked up the two biggest, the data Brader. See, I'm trying. I contemplated going to see somebody to help me lose that Northeast accent, because sometimes, and a lot of times, people say, "Oh, keep it. It's great. It has character." But so now we know he did it to intentionally mess with people from the Northeast. Okay, great. We enjoy that. It's always to go back. But with the Data Brader, jeez, Kris, you might have to take over this for this conversation, or maybe we'll just call it DB. I don't know, the no code API toolkit. With your no code API toolkit, does it sit within Business Central, or is this something that sits outside of Business Central?
It does sit within Business Central. One of the things that I was aiming for with this, a small functional difference, for Eric's solution with Simple Object Designer, he came up with a really clever way for customers to make basically their own extension under the hood. If I understand correctly, and I may be misspeaking, I will let him drive on that one, but his solution, where you configure a bunch of things, he used techno wizardry that then recompiles and creates an extension, so it programmatically is as if you were developing. The way I did this mechanically, there's no wizardry to the way that the data is processed. Which means that the moment you tick the box to say, oh, geez, I forgot the salesperson code on the sales header, and I just need just one more field. You tick that box and you go to Postman or your tool of choice, hit refresh, and you've got that field. It's an instant change. It takes hold right away. Technically, and if you're going to, I occasionally will get some grief over this. If you are changing an API, you are technically changing a contract. So therefore you're invalidating that contract. And so being able to easily change the way that the API works and maybe make a field go away, you could break things. Well, yes, absolutely you could. The idea behind this is that you're making something that is purpose built for the connection that you need, the integration you need. I'm sort of okay with putting that power into someone's hand.
Instead of creating separate versions or trying to create an endpoint that's for the world, it's for a targeted implementation, potentially, depending upon the customer's need at the time.
Well, and it comes back to, you get all these great Power users now that are wanting to do their own solutions with Power Platform and Power BI, especially lots of Power BI, because they're being encouraged to do lots more analysis work against BC data. Sometimes you need setup and supporting tables. You need extra info that isn't available. And I find customers get very frustrated if you say, oh, you want to, for like your vendors, you want to know which vendors use which banks. Well, there isn't really a good API to pull that info into Power BI and do the analysis of how many people are using, this bank or that. So we're going to need to develop an API for that. It'll only take me a half an hour, but then I've also got to deploy it. I've got to make sure there's pipelines set up for it. You're going to have to own this application forever now just to make that one point accessible. And for customers, I kind of explain it in the analogy of it's a bit like you're excited about moving into a place. You've got this gorgeous new kitchen. You can do all these things and you're going, oh, cool. I want to set up this really nice espresso machine on the counter. And your construction firm goes, yeah, but we're going to have to run a new line for that. No one wants to be super excited about paying for running new lines for plumbing just because they want to add new feature. They want to access something that is already theirs, but now they've got to pay for it. So I kind of aimed for, with the way Brader works, I wanted it to be, if you're going to spend 2 or 3 days of development time over a year in either making the API or trying to figure out what isn't working, if you're going to spend that 2 or 3 days through a year, it's already paid for itself.
That is a great analogy too. And I like the way that you painted that picture, is when somebody goes into a new ERP implementation that has all this flexibility, all these features, and then it has the perception that if I want to do something that sounds, again, it's relative, but it sounds common, I have to spend money or time. You talk about the no-code API factory, aka Kris. What is it? Say it, Data Brader.
Data Brader.
So you have to do it. Okay. We have to do that, Kris. Every time I say no code API
Data
factory,
Brader.
you have to say Data Brader. Okay. One thing you talk about now that we're integrating, I have several questions with it, from somebody that works with Business Central a lot, with a lot of customers as well. Some of the questions that I can see being asked are from a security standpoint. What type of security is in place with the no-code API factory? What type of authentication? Is there limitations of data that someone has access to? Can they read? Can they write? Can they update? What can you comment about the security? I'm going to load the questions on. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I can take them all on real easy and quick. First of all, it works within the API framework, which means it works within the security permissions and security filtering framework. So you can't, in the same way that you would assign permissions to users via roles, hopefully, and groups and things like that, those permissions are still going to apply to this as well. And the way Brader works is you decide if you would like an endpoint to be read-only, or if you would like it to be write capable. If you decide to make it write capable, one of the common set of requests I got was, I would like to let my integration company create and update customers. They should never be able to delete. So you can fine tune control how much they are able to access. And there also was requests of, I'd like to be able to return, like when you create a new customer, I want to have a credit limit that is defaulted for them that we send back, but they should never be able to change that. So you also in Brader can configure what fields are included in the response versus what fields are included that can be written to. We also got a lot of requests around, I would like to enforce filtering. So that way, if you call this endpoint, it has to be these criteria. We also got requests of, I don't want this to be valid unless they have supplied these 3 mandatory fields. So we added the mandatory logic to it as well. So there were lots of things that it's not hard to do as a developer, but it takes time that I wanted to bake into it as well.
That's pretty neat.
No, it's great that it's built into the security framework of Business Central. And, you know, as I'm thinking about this, you know, to go back, just to jump in, I do have some more questions. No, what would have been great is if you spelled it like it was from the Northeast, because you could have spelled it Data Breda, like with an ER and an A at the end, or an AH.
All right.
We'll have to think about that. You know,
I'm going to make you a special Northeast edition.
They're going to listen to this, then they got to Google Data Breda. I can't find it.
Yeah, it is spelled common, not the New England common, but the common. Is there a limit to the number of APIs that you can create within the framework that you have put in?
Nope.
So they can create an endless number of APIs.
Yeah.
Like I put the word endless in there.
Mechanically works very similar to config packages, the way where you can import and export information like during an implementation, since that is an easy and commonly understood by consultants way to do things, and pretty common as part of an implementation to be able to do things. So effectively, just like in config packages, you can create packages and then add tables and fields and things like that. This is the same sort of concept of, you add an endpoint, you add which tables you want, what fields. So I was particularly proud of one little thing that was actually a little bit challenging to accomplish from a dev perspective. Someone had asked me, we use variants and locations, and I need to know how much I have in stock of an item of each of those variants at each location so that the web shop is correct. And if you've ever tried to answer that question, you start finding yourself having to explain flow fields and flow filters to somebody who's they just want an answer. So I was particularly proud that we were able to come up with a good mechanism for providing support built in for flow fields. And it's kind of neat. Cool. So if you say like item variant location, you actually get a data set that gives you for each of those combinations, you can see exactly how many at what level they have of different stock. And the same applies to any flow field. So I'll point and click so you don't have to explain anything.
This is cool. That is cool.
That is nice. And this is, if you can build them easily, again, to cut down on development and the cost, the carrying cost, I always am concerned with of a development or a modification. Again, someone who develops, still to be conscious of, what it will be the carrying cost of that modification as far as the updates or the features that come out. We talk about, you had mentioned that you tapped into or have a neat mechanism for processing and working with flow fields. In one case, you referenced the item with variants and locations. How does this impact performance outside of the standard APIs? And I know we can talk about APIs and performance, but that's also been something that I have been hearing a lot about, not necessarily in a negative context within Business Central, but with all of these connected systems, there's always conversation and questions about how many users are going to have, how many items and performance considerations. And with APIs adding a large volume of transactions because of the nature of how they work with other systems typically, what types of performance considerations are there within the no-code API factory?
It's always going to be a little bit slower. than if you were to hire a developer to create a native API. That is absolutely the case. I did run some benchmark examples to try to get a sense of what is kind of the ideal use case threshold for, what number of records does it start to feel like it's really sluggish compared to natively calling an API. I was more worried about that from the read perspective, where you might want to consume a large pile of data than if you were dealing with write transactions, since typically you're not doing giant bulk inserts typically. But the threshold where I started to notice significant enough performance difference from the read side of things was about 10 to 50,000 records on a very slim Docker machine. And I'll be curious to see how that starts to work as it scales up for a cloud. But one of the requests I got was I'd like to be able to do a lot more tuning logic around performance. If it's a small number of columns, a small pile of data, I would like to be able to have really large page sizes. Whereas if it's like the entire customer ledger entry table, I know that's going to be a monster. I'd like it to be smaller pages. So there were 2 or 3 different things that we did to make that easier. You can control the pagination that it does server side on each endpoint, as well as globally. So you can say, start at page 20 and give me 500 records, or give me 50,000, whatever. It'll give you the info about how many. And separately, when you're typically requesting data, you're also wanting to be able to provide filters into it to say, give me only a subset of data. So there's some interesting wizardry involved in being able to do client-side filtering as well as server-side filtering on that. So it's fun.
Wow.
Well, it's a pot of feet. It's great. I'm thinking of some practical uses for it just from the experience that I have had, to be able to easily create these endpoints and to adjust them. I do know that customers would appreciate the ability, as you had mentioned, to, for a specific instance, add a field easily without having to go through an entire process. Uh, and I did mention it earlier. Can you version these APIs like you can with APIs? If you develop an API, you can have like a version 1, version 2, as you mentioned, with the contract changing, so that you can in essence have one contract that multiple endpoints or systems are going to communicate with that endpoint.
Yep. Because they functionally work like the config package system, you just add, V1, V2 at the end of it, and you can version at whatever level of specificity you would like to. And you can make a copy of that and then adjust it and give the new version number. The other thing that is a coming soon feature on the roadmap for, at the very least this year, if not next month, is I'm also introducing a configuration option that lets you do what I call a delta read, which is I only want what's changed since the last time I asked you. I don't care if it's been an hour, 5 minutes, or 15 days. Just only give me the records that have changed since the last time I asked, because I commonly get the, I only need to get the customers that have changed. I've only need the items that have changed their stock quantities, etc. So I'm looking forward to adding that little last piece in my head, last piece of the web connective story. To say, because integration partners have to retain when's the last time did I ask and apply that filtering. The goal here will be they don't even have to do that. They can just say, give me the items, and it'll just give them the changes. So that's a coming soon I'm looking forward to.
No, the delta read is something that again, with some updates to Business Central or planned updates, I have to recall. Again, it's tough. I say all the time with things changing monthly. I don't know if it's a month change, if it's a wave change. Well, I guess the waves are, the monthly, the major wave release, I guess you could say. The delta change, say that. You hit on something I get asked often. Show me the items that have had a quantity change. That would be interesting to see how you solve that one, because to go back to your flow field comment, or your ability to calculate inventory by location or location and variant, to know which have changed
since
doesn't
last.
sound, it sounds simple. It's like anything else. It sounds simple and straightforward, but there's a little bit of effort to get that information if you want to further break it down to location, variant, or something else within, uh, a filter for an item. So that's
Yeah.
something great to have.
So, admittedly, a fair bit of this has been about a product that that I have released and I'm maintaining and all that sort of thing. But I do also want to mention, too, that one of the things on the roadmap for the first half of this year, I also have gotten the question a lot of, I have small customers that are going to need this. I have small customers who they're not going to want to pay for a very clever but too expensive for them system. And this is one of those dinosaur to BC challenges. If you're dealing with a small customer that only has 2 or 3 users, they're paying a couple $100 a month. So any solution that costs a reasonable amount, that it's like maybe 100 even a month, that's half the cost of the whole system for that particular user. So I have gotten that question a fair bit. So one of the things that's coming soon is I'm adding support to the licensing app, the free app that anyone can use. I'm adding transactional billing to that. So that way, DataBrader will be able to scale down to a usage-based billing model. And I'm going to try to keep that to a very reasonable price point for smaller customers. But the advantage for that is that the way we're implementing that change to the licensing app, which is a free app, it's public, anyone can use it. The licensing app will support any sort of usage base that makes sense for you as a publisher. So that could be on number of companies, that could be on number of users, that could be, how many sales headers you process in a month. You can track any number of different metrics and then potentially decide that's your usage scenario and bill based on that. And because it sits on top of the lemon squeezy ecosystem for usage-based billing, you decide what you charge per usage unit. So if you want to say, okay, it's $10 a month per user, well, that your usage would be the number of users that are marked status active in the system. And you report to Lemon Squeezy, here's the month's figure of we had 10 active users, and they'll bill that $100 a month. Wow. Nice and simple. So I'm looking forward to adding support for that to the licensing app very soon.
It's simple.
I think that's a great feature to have. My mind is running wild.
I was just looking at the website, and just kind of learning all about it. I mean, even it's funny because a couple months ago, I was working with an integrator. They've never worked in Business Central, and they're like, okay, how do I consume this endpoint? What do I use? Do I use Postman? What do I do? Yep. And I don't know. I'm just giving you the endpoint. So, and then you're working through that, but your tool would have helped, like major help, just giving them the Postman collection. Say, here's everything you need to do to consume or write back. This is amazing.
Yeah, and Brad, to what he's referring is when you're working with Brader, you can select whatever suite of endpoints you want that particular integrator to consume. Hit a button, it will generate the Postman collection that you can just send them the JSON file, and it will pre-configure all of the stuff. They just need to plug in whatever relevant authorization. It'll ask if it's on-prem or cloud. It'll configure the URLs to match that the correct API calls. So it's designed to be as plug and play as possible, and it will give them examples of, for example, the write endpoints. What are the mandatory fields, but it'll also give them a separate version that are what are all the possible fields, so they can see what's the minimum, what's the complete contract.
What a time saver this is. I'm still back on the whole transactability for the billing that you're thinking of adding. You touched on one of the next questions that I had, but to go back to your comment on transaction billing, it's like you read my mind, because I was in a conversation the other day with someone. They were trying to estimate a report, same type of thing. The cost to the to create this report that somebody estimated was more than the cost of what they're going to pay for the system for several months. And it's very hard to tell a customer, you're paying, $500 a month, fictitiously in this case, I'm making up a number.
Sure.
It's for context only. And we're going to have a report that's going to cost you $3,000, which, you're thinking about what's the yearly budget to use the application to run their business. Now the report just is, is a fairly large portion of that. So to be able to scale it so that anybody can use it is great. And that's one of the things I know Microsoft's working on their entitlements. They're adding features to it. And that's one, I'd like to see that there's a solution, or there will be a solution available for it that's available within App Source and actually can work with something outside of, the Microsoft billing. It can go into the lemon squeezy billing system, I think, that you alluded to using. You did mention this, which was a question that I had, because a lot of apps now, even native within Business Central, only work in the online environment. You had mentioned that this works both for on-prem and online a moment ago. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. I have gone through all the necessary bits and pieces theoretically to do the old school, add the module to the license and all that fun stuff. So in that scenario, the licensing model is a bit simpler that I would work with partners to, build a partner in the very traditional way of doing an ISV style solution. And, they white box bill that onto everyone. But yep. So on-prem capable, absolutely.
And on-prem, the setup is the same as it would be online as far as the security is concerned, or configuration is concerned, assuming somebody wants to, can get access to your Business Central implementation from outside. Somebody can enable whatever ports are necessary.
Effectively, because this works within the API engine of Business Central to render API data, any of the rules and configurations around how Business Central APIs work, ports, authorization, all that stuff, the same will apply to all of that. Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah. And as far as the install process goes, it's straightforward. I would give an appropriate runtime version of the app, just like you would for any on-prem ISV. And I have a nice and simple form for partners to fill out of like, I need a runtime app for this if it's not in the library already. I've got my AL ops all cranking along, creating lots of runtime versions. So if it's not already in the library, then we'll make it.
I'd like this. I can think of it again. It's like I have been saying, these implementations, that the need to develop is decreasing, I think, within Business Central. There's the need to develop tools. I'm not going to take away from that, but to be able to allow many customers to use this is a great tool. And it says, Kris,
time saver. I mean, just even that alone, it would have paid off. I mean, Business Central, it's becoming so popular. There's a lot of third-party products that would typically never integrate back to Business Central, or there's ways around it and stuff like that. But it's starting to have this huge need to have that easy integration of Business Central, and this product alone would certainly help. Major help with so many other endpoints that you can connect to it.
And one of the things that, if imitation wants to be flattery, I am perfectly comfortable with a couple of people picking up some of the clever things that we had done in Brader. The way that the Power BI integration works with that is what it actually does when you select an endpoint and say, I want to consume this in Power BI, it gives you the advanced query syntax. So when you go into Power BI, you just paste that into the query window, and now you're connected up. It's parsed it all out, created the appropriate names for everything, set everything to the right type. And the way that we made the Power Automate generator work, if you haven't tried this out and discovered this for yourself, when you copy Power Automate steps, even in like a group as a part of like the Power Automate scope, that group of steps, when you copy it to clipboard to go paste it into a different action, if you paste that into Notepad, it's just a JSON. So what I did was, in the generation of the endpoint, when you say, I want to consume this endpoint in Power Automate, well, what it does is it puts it available for you, you copy, you go to Power Automate, you just hit paste, and it's got all of the steps that are necessary to compose that set of results. Because Power Automate custom connectors are amazing and powerful, but they assume a fixed contract, which is what APIs are supposed to be. So the way I got around that is you can just paste an updated version of that set of steps. No problem. You add a new field, you tick the box, you copy it again, go to Power Automate, hit paste, replace that step.
See, Kris, I told you this was a hidden gem. When I saw Jeremy announce that this was out, that's my mind just started running with all of the uses for this. And I know, Jeremy, the stuff that you produce too is of great quality, and you'll keep up and update it and keep it current with Business Central, which is great. So the no code API factory.
Data Brader.
Kris, you're sleeping on me over here. Is available on your sparebrained.com website. Is there other documentation on it? Do you have videos or instructions for somebody if they'd like to check this out? How could somebody learn more about the application?
Well, I'm going to give away a trade secret, and people are welcome to copy this as well, as much as they would like to. One of the things that I am building out right now is a documentation website for DataBrader to go over all the steps. Nothing new there, but one of the tools that I am using to make guided tours, which it sounds like Kris has gone to the website and looked at it already. You may have seen on that overview how you almost get a click-through tour of how the product works. That is using a great tool called Supa Demo. And what it is a little browser extension that does the recording of, as you're clicking through software, it'll create a guided tour for you that kind of shows you the step-by-step. And it's been a lot of fun. So we're in the process right this moment of adding to all of the instructional steps. Not only are we going to have the documentation text, but it'll show you click by click how everything works. And part of the goal on that in my head is I want people to try it out in a fashion, and those click-throughs give you a real sense of how it actually will work. And that is the reason that Brader, for example, for Sandbox, for example, doesn't require any activation for 2 months in a Sandbox environment. And there's no usage limitation to it in the Sandbox environments. So the goal there is I want people to try it and be happy with it before they ever spend anything on it. So it's perfectly fine by me if someone's going to implement BC for someone and they go, oh, shoot, we got to solve this integration problem. Let's make sure it's all working in Sandbox before we spend anything on it. Well, good, because I don't want refunds. That's not fun for me.
It ensures the customers are satisfied with the tool, that it's the right tool for the job that they're trying or the problem that they're trying to solve. To me,
absolutely,
everything comes down to what is the problem and what am I going to use to solve the problem. And like you said, giving someone the opportunity to work with it in their environment solidifies that it's the correct tool going forward. So.
And I will not lie, I am very nervous about this because one of the things that is true in our ecosystem is that it tends to be very challenging to sell as a kind bit of advice was given to me, it is very difficult to sell things that solve a technology problem with the platform. So there is definitely a lot of gentle feedback I'm getting from people who've been around for a long time of anytime you're introducing tools that solve the tech problems, it's going to be an uphill battle. So we'll see if that's true. Most of the customers that I've had interested in Brader and starting to work with it are not BC partners. They're power users. They're people who have customers who are BC users, but they themselves are not BC people. And based on that, we have a little service that I do for those non-BC but still technical people. I know what I'm trying to accomplish, but I have no idea where the data lives. So I could not possibly compose the table and line and pick what fields. I don't know where the data lives. Can you help with that? And so I added a little service functionality that you pay per incident of, will describe what you're trying to accomplish, and we'll chase the information about like what tables and fields. We might have to hop on a Teams call to look at it if it's a custom solution or an ISV we haven't encountered before, but we'll help you figure out the solution on a per incident basis to keep the costs down for the customer. So that way it's fixed price, that if you're starting to put Brader in place for someone, you don't want to be like, okay, it'll cost this much, but now we spend $1,000 more than we expected configuring it. No, we have a fixed price per incident. Nice, keep it tidy. Just help us solve these 3 questions.
Wow.
Okay.
No, it's a great model. And it is difficult to sell a solution like you had mentioned, but being a dinosaur, I think I can throw myself into that era. I'm not certain, but the ecosystem has changed, I think, from what it was to where it is today, with the types of customers that are using the application. And again, I think it comes with the evolution of the application being expanded and the wide use that it has now. Whereas before, early on, when it was in the nature that it was, I think it had a smaller footprint. But now with a larger footprint with Microsoft and opening up the integrations with Power Platform, Power BI, that whole stack now, I think the customers are, and I don't mean it ill, our customers are smarter. So they want to do more, they're capable of doing more, even with the licensing change and the structure of that. So there's a lot of things that have changed what does well within this environment. Those 3,000-hour reports, try selling a 3,000-hour report to somebody. They're not, that's a very difficult sell now. Versus years ago,
I think a lot of customers are wanted to be able to do more by themselves too, before they even reach out to anybody. And maybe they'll reach out for a little bit more complex, or maybe get a consultant to help them understand how the system works or how to navigate through it and what's the underlying. But majority of the time, based on my experience, customers are already researching, and by the time they get to you, they've already have some sort of an idea. And as a consultant, you kind of have to unwind a little bit of that and figure out, okay, what are they really trying to do? But yeah, to Brad's point, they're getting smarter and smarter. They want to be able to do it themselves. A good way to save money. And tools like this, I mean, that's a time saver alone. Just because I've experienced it not too long ago, this is the need. But it's crazy.
I have heard a couple of, where was this a month ago?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking when I first saw you announce this. I'm like, where was this a couple months ago? When even, you think about the whole development case and how things happen, and won't get into the whole story behind it. And I think you appreciate it. Even just transposing the spelling of a word or, a field or whatever on an API is a painful process.
Getting to the heart of that, they made the wrong case on the letter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so that's where I could see this be helpful. Well, Jeremy, thank you again for taking the time to speak with us. I was looking forward to learning more about the no-code API factory.
Sure thing,
Chris.
Absolutely.
Data Breda.
No, you can't even. It's the
Data
Brader.
Data Brader.
The data, is it data? Jeremy, data Brader. Help me get rid of this.
Data versus data is definitely a big localization sort of thing. So I tend to go with the harder A, the data Brader.
Data.
Okay. Data Brader. So if someone would like to learn more about the data Brader, your book, the Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central API reference, the licensing app that you had also referenced, as well as some of the other great things that you're doing, because you do a large number of great things for the community. I didn't even want to, we will tell us how to get hold of you, but I wanted to also talk to you about, I saw that you're going to be speaking at Dynamic Minds too. and you look like you're
Yes.
going to have a great session. I saw that, Kris. I don't know when
Yeah,
he released it. I was away
last
for a
week.
couple of days, but I saw what you're going to present. I was like, I
Mhm.
really need to get there. So maybe you can tell us all of that and then talk about that as well too, please.
Sure, sure. The plans for this year, there's a bunch of odds and ends. Definitely doing Dynamics Minds as a speaker this year. I had a couple sessions selected. One I'm looking greatly forward to. I've been doing a lot of work over the past several months with the next major Excel reporting. And how that falls right into Kris's story on, like, users want to be able to consume and be able to work with their own data and that sort of thing. The Excel reporting is going to be very powerful for how that can present some information in new ways. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to, we're kind of breaking away the job of developers will be around building the data model, what goes into the Excel spreadsheet, and then we can move the presentation layer and the work of how that's going to be consumed. The pivot tables, all the different charts that you build off of that can then be something that is consultative or end user driven. Since you can do the report layout design, you can upload and replace those. And I think decoupling the development effort from the presentation effort will be very, very powerful indeed. And I'm also looking forward to, for the developers who are coming to Dynamics Minds, I didn't want them to feel left out and unloved. So I'm going to do a session on how the heck do I code the speed I do? What are some of the things I've done to my Visual Studio Code that make things easier? And I promise that I will only mention anything AI related once during that whole talk. Uh, so it's going to be non-AI related solutions of going faster.
Unfortunately, at this point, I don't think I'll be able to attend due to scheduling. But if you want someone to watch your presentation, if you want to do a dry run, call me, please. Because I saw that topic when I looked at your post and I said, I need to see this session. So
Well,
feel free
some of
to
the
share it.
Some of the odds and ends that are on the roadmap for Spare Brain for this year include, in the near future, going to be updating the Your First 20 Hours to a second edition. I've gotten a lot of feedback over the past 2-3 years of its life cycle that it's helped a lot of people study for the MB800. And I still have a couple of people who had never seen BC before, sat down with my book, started using it, and they were still able to get about 650 on the test in a pretty short period of time. Obviously, I don't want it to be, something that is, you study this book and then you can pass a test and you know nothing. The whole point of the book is you can go from an empty company to you can transact in the company. So it is still going to be that focus, but I'm going to be adding a small array of new chapters that'll cover some of the topics that the MB800 covers that I didn't touch on. So that will hopefully bump that over to kind of the official study guide of the MB800. I haven't taken it on purpose, so that way no one can say, you wrote that to pass the test. No, I looked at the study guide to see what chapters I'm missing. That's about it, though.
That's a great approach, by the way. That's
Yeah.
admirable. It's you haven't taken it, therefore you don't know, and you're just creating a book, like you said, to help somebody go from zero to functional company with a
Yep.
guide. I like
So
that.
we've got the Your First 20 Hours update coming. We've got the licensing app for transactability, usage-based billing coming. There is a project that we're working on to try to help out with HR and career development that is on moving from the back burner to the front burner now that Brader is done. So I'm going to be doing some real interesting things around that. So we'll probably be talking soon about that. Because I'm going to want that to be something that everyone can use. And those are always tricky things of how do you make it worth the time you pour into it, because it's a lot of time. But that's going to be lots and lots of fun. And I'm also looking forward to trying out some different ways to share knowledge in ways that I haven't done before to try to get more of us dinosaur type knowledge out into the field for everyone.
I love it. Awesome.
Chris, we have to do that. We have to get a how dinosaurs don't become extinct. I keep saying this,
You
but
become a
I
teacher.
think Jeremy, I'll have to talk with you after. You have to help me recruit the crew that we'll have on that forum. Maybe we can get a good group.
Well,
Not too large,
there's
not too
a
small.
center of excellence that is currently in
Yeah.
development that is looking for lots of good mentoring and things like that too. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Steve Endo's journey and Tanya as well, how that journey is going to develop. I think there's a lot of really good opportunity there because there's a lot of people really hungry to develop their skills coming from an area that has been under serviced. And I think that bringing all more of that dinosaur knowledge to these fresh, hungry new people, I think combining that will actually make a real powerhouse.
Yeah, it's
That
it's
is
an
a great
inspiration.
initiative
Yeah.
that they have. I saw it and I keep seeing the progress. And I talked with Steve early on when he was working with that. And I think that's another admirable effort for the community and for the product. And like you said, for an underserviced region. And yeah, I can see that becoming successful just because of the nature of how they are behind it with Steve and Tanya. And I think you'll probably see a lot more of that in other areas because they'll show how it can be done. So I'm happy and to see that effort for a number of reasons. Just one for the Business Central product, but it goes beyond just the Business Central product as well with what they're doing, and also servicing an underserviced region and giving them the opportunity to learn. Like you said, it's amazing to feed those minds and expand another region of the world. Great. So how can someone get a hold of you to keep up with all of these great things, to see the progress of your book? See, you have such a huge list. You just covered all. I'm not going to try to repeat it.
Yeah, it's always an interesting sort of thing whenever I'm doing a slide deck for a conference of what do I know him from? I'll go through them real quick here, but one of the easiest ways to jump off to lots of different places is if you go to sparebrain.com/Jeremy, then that'll link to all the different preferred places to chase me down and find me. I think I still have a link to last year. I was experimenting with, was it last year? Might have even been the year before that I was experimenting with podcasting, but I haven't updated that in a while because that used to be when I worked from home. And it was really easy to roll out of bed on a Sunday morning and babble at the camera for an hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
These days, it's a little harder to get that going.
Well, it's good that you're back in the office and you have the separation, which is nice. And you do, and you are involved in a lot. And one of these days, I'll have to get some time management advice from you. I know we spoke about that briefly before, but also that not remembering when something occurred, that is the true sign of a dinosaur. And we'll end with my story on that is, when you're a young child, Christmas, Chris heard me say this in other conversations. So Chris, you can, hang up or something if you want. When you're 6 or 7, Christmas would seem like it was forever, right? It would never come because it was, a year away. But when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, a year is such a small percentage of your life. But when you become a dinosaur and you have many of those years, so let's just say if you're 50, 45, 60, I don't know what the true age of a dinosaur is. I go by when you came into the community, but 1 year is now a smaller percentage. So it's not a significant piece of time. Therefore, they start to overlap because I have conversations like, oh, last week we talked about this. And they're like, no, Brad, that was 2 years ago. Like, oh, geez, time to wrap it up.
Yep. Well, our perception of time is definitely flavored by how the time was spent. And if you're leading a rich and busy life, it is much harder to discern when things happened. It might have been last week, it might have been 2 years ago, but you lose track a lot easier when you're living a rich and busy life.
100%.
It's a great point. Great point. Jeremy, thank you again for taking the time. Again, we just talked about the time. Time is limited. We all work with our time, and time is one of those valuable things that you can't get back. So anyone that spends any time with us, we're both greatly appreciative of, because you gave that time to speak with us and to the members of the community. So I'd like to thank you for that. And also,
And that's why they should get this product, because then it'll save them time to do more fun stuff.
Yes.
Anytime,
and I'm looking for.
Anytime you use the word time, you can also swap in the word life. So
yes.
Save time, save life.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you again. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the great things that you're going to be doing over the upcoming year. And who knows, maybe this time next year we'll have another API product to talk with you about, or enhancement for it. But thank you again. And
thank you,
we'll
Jeremy.
talk to you soon. Ciao, ciao.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.